One thing you have to know about every Zimbabwean is even if they're spending $1, even if they're spending 50 cents, they want to make sure that they get the best or the most value for their money. What am I saying? Zimbabweans need value for their money. They don't like it when sellers or business people try to undermine the amount of money that they've paid for a certain service. Now, I'm talking about InDrive, I'm talking about taxis, and I'm talking about something called Tap and Go. You know, we have 2 ride services in Zimbabwe. Which one gives you the best value for your money? Because I know, like me, like you, we all want the best value for our money. And in this video today, we are going to be comparing Tap and Go versus InDrive. Which one is the best ride service in Zimbabwe? I am Carreviewszim, and thank you so much for tuning in to this channel where we give you the best of the best when it comes to car buying advice and car advice in general. I am Carreviewszim once again. I always say my name so that you always remember that before you buy a car or before you make any car related decision, you need to come and see Zimcars. If you have not yet subscribed, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you keep on getting more and of course more of the good stuff, and press that notification bell so that every time you upload a new video, you will be the first one to get notified. Let's get straight into our video for today. The first thing you need to consider when it comes to InDrive and Tap and Go, these 2 companies have 2 business models that are quite different. You know, when it comes to InDrive is a platform whereby people with their own cars, they go onto the platform, register on the platform, and use their cars as taxis. So it's like getting a lift from your neighbor, you know, at a fee. That's InDrive. And then when it comes to Tap and Go, now Tap and Go is the old, you know, taxi company that we know, you know, the old model that we know, whereby a company buys lots of cars, gets drivers, and use those cars as taxis. So that's the best point. That's the major key difference of these 2 companies, you know. And then now let us now look at these 2 companies in detail and try to find out which one is the best for you and which one is the best generally. So point number 1, their pricing. Now price control for these 2 companies is quite different. Why? Because when it comes to InDrive, now InDrive lets you decide the price, but do they really let you decide the price? No. What they do is they put you know, a base price. Like let's say for example, for 10 kilometers, you know, with InDrive for 10 kilometers they don't charge anything less than $3. So you might pay more, you might pay less, but not less than $3 if they've pegged that route for at $3. When it comes to to Tap and Go, now Tap and Go just puts a price. If that route is $5, it sticks at $5. You won't be overcharged for anything. So generally when it comes to pricing, you're bound to get better deals from Tap and Go than from InDrive. Why? Because generally Tap and Go is cheaper than InDrive. Maybe it's their, you know, market penetration strategy, but so far Tap and Go has proven to be cheaper than InDrive. Why? Because InDrive, they just give you a base price and the driver decides if they want to take that base price, or they can charge you maybe $4 for a $3 route. So you need to consider that when choosing this between these 2, right? And then number 2, availability. Because InDrive now uses the model whereby anyone can be a driver and anyone can be a taxi. InDrive is bound to have more cars than Tap and Go. Why? Because Tap and Go relies on their own vehicles that they've purchased. So you need to consider that InDrive is bound to have more available rides than Tap and Go, mainly because anyone can just join InDrive, and InDrive has grown in popularity. So many people are doing, you know, like a side hustle of just, you know, being on InDrive. Maybe they are going to town, they just go on InDrive, get 2 passengers, and they go as they are on their way to town. They just, you know, take you with them and then go. So you are bound to get more rides on InDrive than on Tap and Go. So you need to consider that, you know, there are more rides on InDrive than on Tap and Go, generally because of their business model. And then moving on to number 3, application reliability. I've used both applications, both Tap and Go and InDrive application, but one thing that I can tell you is the smoother application is the InDrive application. One, because it is the smoothest. You don't get, you know, unnecessary glitches, you don't get, you know, map glitches, you don't even get, you know, the app crashing, you know, as compared to the Tap and Go app, which crashes regularly, and you know, you get a lot of glitches on Tap and Go. So in terms of the application and the user friendliness of the application, InDrive takes it. You know, the Tap and Go application is a good application, the interface looks good, but in terms of you actually using the application, you know, the InDrive application gets more reliable than the Tap and Go application. So you need to really consider that if you are planning on choosing which ride service to use. And then moving on to number 4, when you talk of safety and accountability. Now, in terms of safety and accountability, Tap and Go wins, and here is why Tap and Go wins. Tap and Go is a company, and each and every they get more information of their drivers, and you know, they get better cars because their cars are being serviced at once, as opposed to InDrive, whereby it's my car, you don't tell me when to service my car. So I might be giving people rides with a car that has, you know, a bad suspension, that has, you know, even bad tires. Why? Because there is no quality control when it comes to InDrive. Because once I've joined InDrive, no one will tell me, have you serviced you? No one will ask me if I've serviced my car. No one will ask me if my car is even roadworthy. So in terms of safety, Tap and Go takes it because there's better quality control since the cars are owned by one company. And also the other thing to consider is because this is Tap and Go is a company that employs driver rather than a company that gets people to use their cars to give other people rides. You know, it's different from a stranger giving you a ride, as opposed to what Tap and Go does, whereby it's a company giving you a ride. So the company is bound to be safer. Why? Because the company is governed better than trying to govern in a stranger giving a stranger a ride. You know, so the information and the probability of you being given a ride by a thief is less at Tap and Go than it is at InDrive. So just make sure that you consider that when you're choosing a ride. And then moving on, and also speaking on that safety, you know, InDrive is less strict on background checks. Anyone can just sign up easily. Sometimes you may just even lie, you know, on InDrive, because you know the checks are not as strict, as opposed to Tap and Go. You know, they screen and they know every driver that they have. Why? Because those drivers have to go through interviews, like physical interviews, before they get the keys to the car that they are going to be using to be taking you wherever you want to go. So you need to consider that. And then moving on to number 5, payment methods. You know, InDrive payment methods really vary from driver to driver. Some drivers might say they don't want EcoCash. Some might say they want EcoCash. Some might say we want cash only. Some might say you can even pay with EcoCash. So you need to make sure that you understand why this happens with InDrive, because InDrive is just a bunch of strangers that are giving strangers rides. Each and every person tends to have their own preferences when it comes to how they want to be paid, as opposed to Tap and Go, which is a company. You can go ahead and pay via EcoCash. If the company says we want EcoCash or we take, you know, online payments, you will just get those online payments. And those, if the company says you can pay both using cash or online payment, you know, it's the same with every ride that you're going to get, as opposed to InDrive, whereby an individual might say, I don't take online payments, I only take cash. So you need to consider that in terms of, you know, the reliability of the types of payments that you use to pay for these rides. Tap and Go tends to be better than InDrive. And then moving on, driver behavior now, because InDrive, you know, panofira InDrive kazhinji is because InDrive just gets anyone to drive anyone. So there's no any form of training, there's no any any company policy in terms of how to talk to my clients, as opposed to Tap and Go, which is a company now. So Tap and Go is bound to have better customer service in terms of driver to passenger interaction, better, more than InDrive. Why? Because Tap and Go is a company, you know, and people know that when you get into a company, they teach you how to talk to clients, as opposed to, you cannot tell me how I talk to people when I'm driving my own car. Sometimes, you know, some of these InDrive drivers might even tell you, I don't want to me turn on the radio. Why? Because it annoys me, or the radio annoys me, as opposed to these tap and go drivers that have been trained, to put the customer first, because they go through rigorous training before they come and start picking you up and start taking you wherever you have to go. So you need to make sure that in terms of driver behavior, generally, because tap and go or because of tap and go's business model, they are bound to get better behavior from their drivers than InDrive. Why? Because they can control their drivers, as opposed to InDrive, whereby they cannot control me if I am giving you a ride, because I'm using my car after all. So if they think that they can fire me, I can just take my car with me, as opposed to losing my job when doing tap and go. And then moving on to number 7, there is what we call negotiation fatigue. As I said earlier, the pricing of InDrive is slightly different from that. It's way different from that of tap and go. Tap and go just gives you a fixed price. There is no other negotiations that you need to do when it comes to price, because if they say it's $7, you're just going to pay $7. But sometimes in InDrive, you might enter that you are trying to go from point A to point B, and you want to pay $3, and wow, after you have put in that $3, or you have suggested that you have $3 for that ride, some drivers might show up on that route but charging you more than what you have placed on that ride. Some drivers might accept your ride but charge you like $5 instead of the $3 that you've put in. So you need to be really careful in terms of that, because it happens to most people, and they get shocked when they're being told that this ride is $5 when you thought you had put in $3. So you need to make sure that that loophole, you need to know that loophole before getting a ride from an InDrive. You need to make sure that you know exactly the exact amount that you have agreed with the driver. So generally, from me saying all of this, you are now getting what we call negotiation fatigue, whereby you are like, but can I $3? He also got $4. You're starting. It's sort of a back and forth, and most people don't like back and forth, which now gives an advantage to tap and go, which is just a fixed price. Once off, you just know that if the ride has been, if they've charged me $7, I'm just going to pay $7. There's no one who's going to say, but we're not as opinion no more. So you need to make sure that you consider that. And moving on to number 8, we talk about ride type variety. Now, from InDrive, because there are cars owned by different people, and people like different things, so they are bound to be a greater variety of cars from Toyota Wish, Honda Fit. Sometimes you might get a Raptor on InDrive, so you get a wide range of a wide selection of vehicles, as opposed to tap and go, which have a limited fleet. You just know if tap and go has, let's say for example, Honda Fit and Aqua only, you know that the whole fleet is Honda Fit and Aqua only. But generally, that's an advantage. Why? Because you get to get the same ride every time, as opposed to InDrive, whereby you can get a Honda Fit today, tomorrow a Wish, the other day a Toyota Fit. So it has a greater variety. To some, it's an advantage. To some, it's not an advantage. To people that like the same thing again and again and again, or to people, especially to people that like consistency. In terms of ride consistency, InDrive tends to not be as consistent as tap and go. And then moving on to number 9, driver loyalty. When it comes to InDrive drivers can get rides from multiple applications. You can be an InDrive driver. You can be registered on via InDrive and Bolt, as opposed to tap and go, whereby you are employed by tap and go, so you cannot take rides from other applications. You cannot take an InDrive ride with a tap and go car. Why? Because it's a company car. You cannot use a company car anyhow. So generally, in terms of driver loyalty, tap and go drivers are bound to be more loyal but this does not really apply to us. But if it matters to you now, you will know that tap and go drivers usually tend to be more loyal to their company more than InDrive drivers who can take a ride from anywhere. InDrive drivers can even take a ride just from the side of the road. You can just wave to the car and say, is it InDrive? And if they say yes, you just get in there. You won't even use the application. So in terms of loyalty, tap and go drivers tend to be more loyal, and their loyalty tends to now affects us. Why? Because it to a certain extent reflects the level of security that you get from these two brands. Why? Because if a driver is loyal to their company, they are most likely to give you the most secure ride than a driver who is not even loyal to the company that he claims to work for. So you need to consider that in terms of loyalty, InDrive drivers are less loyal than tap and go drivers. And then last but not least, public perception. Now, InDrive is known for hustle culture. Most people that are doing InDrive are just people just doing their side hustle, and you know what it means when someone is doing their side hustle. They are bound to be less serious with the reviews. They are bound to be less serious with how you feel about that ride, as opposed to tap and go, which is known to be the main job of most of these drivers. So they are bound to care about how you feel about too many abouts. Too many abouts. Let me try to rephrase this. So when it comes to tap and go now, the drivers are bound to care about the level of satisfaction that you get from the service that they give you. Why? Because it is their main job. Main job versus side hustle. Side hustle is just something that you do to get a quick buck. So you don't really care if your customers are happy or not. But when it comes to a full-time job now, you tend to be more concerned of the kinds of review that you get from your clients, the feedback that you get from your clients, because your livelihood depends on that main job. So generally, when it comes to public perception now, InDrive, it's nice because it is something that we've always had. But when it comes, to us viewing these two companies objectively, you know that the better choice when it comes to really caring about how you feel and how you rate the drive and how your level of satisfaction matters. Now it matters more to tap and go than it matters to InDrive. So what are we saying? Am I saying InDrive is bad? No. Why? Because after all, those strangers that are giving each other rides are us giving our friends, our families, and other people that we don't know rides. So generally, I don't want to downplay what has been happening. But if I'm to choose between the two companies, I would rather choose tap and go because of the safety that it guarantees me, as opposed to the safety that we get from InDrive. We've had many instances whereby people have been mugged in InDrives. We've had those stories. We've had stories whereby sometimes passengers mugging drivers, sometimes drivers mugging passengers. But after all of this has happened, do you have any way to report? You cannot go and report to InDrive because some of these drivers have different registration cards than what they are using on ground. You might go and report a certain number plate to InDrive, and they claim that we don't even know that number plate, because most of these drivers do it. I remember one time I ordered an InDrive, and the registration number that was on the application was different from the car that I received. What does it say now? It talks about the level of safety that and the level of jeopardy that I was putting my life at by going into an InDrive, which is a different registration from the one that I booked on the application, as opposed to tap and go. As long as the car is branded tap and go and you have confirmed that car is coming from tap and go, whatever happens, that the company will not be able to try to play games with you, or to try to avoid compensating whatever loss that you get from that ride. So you just need to consider, when it comes to safety, tap and go is always better. But when it comes to reliability and ride availability, InDrive is always better. Why? Because it has more rides than tap and go. So the choice is yours. Comment down below, which one do you choose, Tap and Go or InDrive? Until we meet again, always remember that a prayer day keeps the devil away. Stay safe, like, share and subscribe.